Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbite. We're continuing with our candidate series tonight, and joining me is Brooke Paige, who won't tell me what the H is. But anyway, he's a Republican running for a couple of positions, President of the United States, Vermont Secretary of State, and Attorney General. Welcome.
It's my pleasure.
First time.
I know.
After all these years.
I'm hard to wrestle in, you know.
You made a funny face when I said president. I saw your name on the ballot. It came to my house.
There. And I know we'll be talking about that in a minute.
Yes, we will. So could you share with our viewers a little bit of your background?
Well, I'm from down south, and my formative years were spent in Delaware. I graduated from the University of Delaware with a degree in marketing and finance. So I'm running against one of my fellow alumni,
Yes, right. That's
Joe
right.
Biden.
That's right.
Although he's trying to claim he went to Del State, which is an all-black college.
Did he? I didn't.
Oh, you didn't hear that? That was the
No,
best. He was down giving a speech at Delaware State and said, "Oh yeah, I got my start here." And everybody's going, "What are you talking about?" Anyway, getting back on track. So I graduated from University of Delaware, where I also met my charming bride, Donna.
Oh, I have met her. She is lovely.
And so I went out. It was the middle of the Carter administration. There were no jobs to be had, so I wound up getting into industrial food service, which is running the cafeterias and vending in big factories.
Oh, interesting.
So in Delaware, I was responsible for the General Motors assembly plant at Boxwood and the Chrysler assembly plant in Newark, Delaware. And then for some reason, the St. Mark's Catholic School District.
Cool.
And in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Navy Yard, where they were refitting the Saratoga at the time.
Interesting.
And so I had like 7 locations altogether.
Wow.
And so I did that for a couple of years, and I actually turned around unprofitable operations, and they gave me lots of money, but wouldn't give me any assistance. And I was like working like 100 hours a week, and finally said, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. So I went to work for Sterling Drug as a regional sales manager, and we sold all sorts of industrial things, disinfectants and instrument sterilants and things like that. I did that for 2 or 3 years until Sterling had a hostile takeover with Kodak.
Oh.
And so Kodak didn't know what they were doing. And fortunately for me, I was part of management, although I had never thought I'd get vested, because we always were intending to move here to Vermont. Right. But because I was in the PASOP programs and all of that.
Oh my God, there's an old name.
I know.
What is that?
That the higher-ups in New York, Sterling was a big company. I worked for a little division.
Right.
I mean, we made everything from Love My Carpet to Givenchy perfume, for crying out loud, and Bear aspirin and all sorts of real drugs too. And so the Kodak hostile takeover was not looked kindly upon by the old ironed shirts there on Fifth Avenue. And so they put poison pills and golden parachutes in that ritually rewarded all of us for Kodak's misbehavior. Anyway, I wound up getting out of there and went to work for one of the folks that had distributed my products when I worked for Sterling, and that was a division of Hammermill Paper, fine paper company out of Pittsburgh at that time. Harrisburg. And so I was doing real good there. I was director of sales and marketing, and we were doing lots and lots of business and everything, and all of a sudden, International Paper comes along.
Oh my God.
And
what are you, like a magnet?
I was a magnet for hostile takeovers.
Exactly. Nobody will hire you.
Just like at Sterling, the nice old guys who ran Hammermill paper, we were a fine paper house. We made, book binding paper and high quality papers. And International Paper made, like other kinds of paper, copy paper, toilet paper, stuff like that. But they wanted our fine paper. And so once again, we were in hostile takeover, golden parachutes and poison pills. And they didn't want the division that I was in, which was in institutional and industrial distribution. Right. So they were closing that down, but I got another nice big paycheck.
Good for you.
I know. So at this point I go, I'm clawing my way up the corporate ladder twice, really 3 times if you counted Interstate United, which was the first job. And I said, this is nuts. So I went into business for myself, running newsstands and coffee shops in the subway system of Philadelphia, guerrilla retail at its finest.
I
You know,
bet.
biggest sale was like $1.50 a day, and we were doing, I think, $3.5 million a year.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, you have a lot of traffic through those
Yeah, well, I was in-
tunnels.
Anyway, so I did that for the next 30 years, and shortly after we'd got the business started, my wife really wanted to move to Vermont, so we moved here to Vermont, and
Great.
had an epic commute for 30 years, back and forth, down on Sundays and back on
Down
Fridays.
to where?
Philadelphia.
Oh, good Lord. Do we even have planes that go there?
Oh,
direct?
at the time, U.S. Air.
Oh, that
Remember
was
they
kinda
had
cheap, too.
they had a little slogan where
Yeah.
we've got the what was it, green of Vermont and the red of Rhode Island, and they had a little.
It was
little
pretty
tune.
cheap, too, wasn't it? Yeah, it was like 99 or
$49
something. Yeah.
a round trip. It
Yeah,
was like
great.
the best. So I did that for as long until 9/11 screwed everything up. Business went in the tank. I was working for wages after that, and U.S. Air went to $300 round trip.
wow.
So I had to start driving to Manchester, where you could still fly for $49.
wow.
And so anyway, so I did all of that, and probably still would be doing that, except in 2008, I almost died from congestive heart failure,
Well, that'll slow
which
you
was
down.
really a misdiagnosis. I had congestive heart failure. I was told I had a bronchial infection, and I almost died before I got it turned
Whoa.
around. But I did everything the doctors told me, and here
Here
I
you
am,
are. Good for
much
you.
to the chagrin of many people.
I say nothing.
Anyway, so, but during this time, I've always been interested in history and in politics
Right.
and things like that. And being at the newsstand every night, working till 11, I had lots of time to read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal
I
and
used to read the Times, no longer. It used to be this thick on Sundays, no more.
all
right?
the papers used
Yeah,
to be that
right.
thick. Now you can't even take care of the bird cage
No, I
for
know
a good
it.
week.
Exactly. Exactly.
Anyway, so here I am, and,
There you go.
and you know,
Well, and you have ventured into politics before by running.
I have.
And I think you got good name recognition out there.
Well, name recognition, the word good may be an
Well,
extra
but
attachment.
you're
to-
on the ballot
I am.
for president, but just in Vermont, I'm assuming, right?
I am only
Right.
in Vermont, and that was done for several reasons. One, at the time, Kamala Harris,
Kamala.
I-
Took me forever because I was saying Camilla or something. And
Anyway, so it was said that she was going to run for president, and so I wanted to have the opportunity to challenge her qualifications
Yeah.
if it came up. And one of my previous lawsuits, it was ultimately decided that you had to be a candidate to challenge another candidate. So Jimmy Condos had made it so easy to get on the ballot.
well,
that it
look
was
at all
in-
the names. They come from Texas. I mean, there's like 15 or so. I
there's
didn't
21
count.
if I'm-
Oh my God.
Anyway, so beyond that, the legitimate reason was, other than to have bragging rights forever, that I was on the
Running for
presidential
president,
ballot. I did want to give people a choice. You know, you hear all these people, Phil Scott and Scott Millen, going, "Oh, I don't want to vote for Trump, and
Yeah,
I don't
right,
want to vote for Biden. I'm going to write in Jim Douglas." I said, "Well, if you write somebody
Write you
in,
in.
well, no, you don't have to write me in. You just
Yes, vote
grid the little
check.
box, you know."
Right.
But because if you write somebody and then your ballot if you're a place where they do the ballots automatically, your ballot gets rejected, sent out,
Yes,
and it
and they-
gets a lot of extra handling,
Right, right.
and things can happen, you know. And so I
Right.
said,
yeah,
you know,
we have to count them separately. I remember that.
and so if you just grid my little name in, you'll
There you
make
go.
things a lot easier for the town clerks and city clerks on
Yep.
election night. So I guess that's all of it. I'm on the ballot with my wonderful cousin.
Oh, I was wondering who that gentleman was. The grumpy old Patriots was.
Well, that was
right.
all about me. I wanted to be the GOP candidate.
I got that when I read it. I went, "Oh, very clever." The
And
grumpy
so
old Patriots.
we're the grumpy old patriots, and if we can muster a couple thousand votes, it'll be very
cool.
entertaining. But
So a little bit about your cousin. What's his name?
Tom Whitman,
Okay,
and
that's right.
my middle, the middle child of my Aunt Pauline. He was in the Navy during the Vietnam War as a submariner. He studied at Ursinus nuclear enginering, and so he had been the guy on the nuclear sub that he
Wow.
was on. So he had a pretty important job. He then, after he got out of the Navy, then went into engineering generally,
Yeah.
and I think really electrical engineering was a big part of his
Nice.
private, when he was in
Right.
private business.
Yep.
And he's retired now. He lives in the hills of Georgia.
Good.
And you know that one of the requirements is that your vice presidential running mate can't be from the same state that you're from.
Really?
Absolutely. Now it only applies in those states.
I never knew how.
Because in the Constitution.
Yeah. Oh, that thing.
Yeah, that thing.
Oh, that thing.
The I and four other people read.
Yeah, right.
It says that electors cannot vote for the presidential and vice presidential candidate cannot be both from their state.
I never.
So here in Vermont, if I picked, say, Dan Feliciano, who's one of my electors, as a matter of fact, they couldn't go in and vote for me and for Dan as our presidential ticket. Now, if you look on the ticket in Vermont, two of the candidates are both from Wyoming and some other stuff like that. So nobody was paying attention.
They didn't read it either.
Right.
So your cousin we can't vote for him because?
No, you can vote for it. If I had picked another Vermonter.
Right.
If I were so fortunate as to get the majority of votes in Vermont, and my 3 electors went down to the State House.
Oh, I see.
They are prohibited from voting for 2 Vermonters as the presidential ticket.
Very interesting.
I know.
Seriously, I've never heard that, and I've been around
everybody,
a while.
half the
I bet
people
nobody knows it.
You'd be surprised the number of people that I thought surely would know that don't.
Nope, I don't know.
I know.
Not that I'm the.
Anyway, so we're on the ballot primarily, so you have a third choice.
That's excellent.
We're the.
So I was going to ask you this. I don't know if you actually have a platform for this position, but if asked,
as you are now,
what would you do if?
Well, I am a constitutional conservative and believe in small government. So I would like to see, yeah, right.
Sorry.
Another thing nobody is anymore.
Right.
And so I would like to see, return of control to the states. Now in Vermont, that might not be such a good thing, but the federal government has used its largesse to seize control of so many things.
Right.
A good example is education.
Yeah.
We get education dollars from the feds, but there's so many strings attached.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if that's a good deal sometimes to take that money because you could strangle on the.
Oh yeah, well
seriously.
And so my thing is that states' rights, which is another dirty word nobody's allowed to say because they think it means something it doesn't, but that states' rights, which is a part of the Constitution, is really important. And so that's kind of our platform.
Well, my favorite word is local control in education. I say it means local influence because locally we have very little control on education.
We did.
Yes, but not anymore.
And it was actually another one of my lawsuits was against the state, as you know, for Act 46. And another reason why I'm running for Attorney General that we'll talk about later is they want to make sure that nobody ever gets to have standing to raise real questions. They bludgeon you to death in the court system. Oh, he doesn't have standing.
On Act 46?
On anything.
On anything, right.
Every time I go to sue the state, we spend a half a year in court.
I remember reading that on some lawsuit that you didn't have standing.
Well,
I
always, when I get to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court says, well, you did have standing, but now the issue has become moot with the passage of time. So in my first case, Todd Delos was a really nice guy who was the AG against me, and he and I actually had a kind of a civil relationship.
When was that? What
this
year
would
was
have been, oh my God, 2012, I guess. In the first Obama suit.
Okay.
And Todd says, well, you have to understand, Brooke, and this is when Sorrell was still in office. He says, we have a rule around here. He says we like to keep the cases unripe, meaning that we're claiming that you can't yet bring it because the thing hasn't happened, until it becomes moot. And he said,
so you can't do anything.
You can't do anything because it's over. He says, and we always use standing, jurisdiction, venue, and timing as our tools to keep citizens from challenging what the state's doing. Anyway, and that's one of the things I'd like to change if I become Attorney General, to allow citizens who have complaints about the structure or function of government to get beyond standing and to be able to bring their cases in court as the state constitution clearly says they should have a right. It's something to the extent every citizen has a right to have their case heard based upon the merits.
On the other side of that coin, there's, I think, too many people jump in on Act 250 because, you know, they line up at the door and start, I object because I don't think a lot of those people.
Well, but they're
does have
not
some-
bringing the original case. They're just
No,
becoming
they're
part of
just
the
complaints,
process.
right, right, and stalling it out.
And that's that's somewhat different. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that's, you know, kind of, we're getting into why am I running for all
Yes.
these different things. And one of the reasons that I started running for all these different things was because of open primaries. Here in Vermont, we have open primaries where anybody can sign up to.
That's
if
true.
you can find 500 or
Right.
50 or 100 fools, depending on what the thing is. If you can find, you know, some compassionate people that'll sign your petition,
Right.
you can be anything.
Yep.
I ran in 14 and 16 for governor and
Yeah.
attorney general against, first of all, against Bill Sorrell and against Pete Shumlin, where I got over 25% of the vote. How insane is that? Everybody knew I was conservative Republican.
Right.
And I say,
That's
well, they
great
weren't.
showing.
I know, I say, well, they weren't voting for me. They were voting against Shumlin
right.
and Sorrell.
Yeah.
You know,
I think a lot of people this year feel, in some cases, that it's the lesser of.
well, I'm
And that's not a- that's
hoping,
not a way
I'm
to
hoping that you know, some of them understand my sense of humor, and others realize that the Jimmy Condos and T.J. Donovan really, you know, aren't doing their jobs properly. But that's for a little bit later on.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten in any of these positions, and even now with the Vermont Secretary of State and Attorney General, have you gotten your voice heard? Have you been in a debate or people?
Oh yeah,
people,
of course. I've been on Channel 17 and
Oh, great.
and the young Vermont business people had a forum, and so I get out there and about. You know,
Great.
I actually Channel 3 has finally contacted me begrudgingly, and so I'm doing a
They
piece
give
with
time
them.
to others. They
Oh, I
have
know.
to-
Well, that's
it's,
you know,
it's the law, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Didn't they change? Speaking of petitions, didn't they change the law? Like if I signed your petition for president, that's the only petition I could sign years ago because it's a one person position. But I think they opened it up that now I could sign 100 petitions to get the person on the ballot.
As I understand the law, and I think I understand it accurately, you may sign as many petitions as there are people running for the office. So you could not, if I was running, if I was out getting my petition signed,
Yeah.
which we didn't even have to bother to do
Yeah,
this
right,
time.
this year is just-
Thank you, Jim Condos,
Yeah,
for
right.
turning us into elections gone wild. But normally, if I was coming to you and saying, can you sign my petition for
Right.
governor?
Right.
I would be the only Republican that you could sign a petition for. But if a Democrat or a progressive or a libertarian came to you, you could sign each of their petitions.
I didn't understand it that way.
Yeah, okay.
Don't anybody check the petitions I sign.
Oh, I know lots of.
well-
but the thing is, there's no downside and no penalty because
Yeah.
Jim's not checking anything
Well,
anyway.
nobody is. I don't think anybody
I mean,
is.
I found that out in 2016 when we dug into the presidential petitions, and they were letting folks from Greenfield, Massachusetts, and Wilmington, Delaware.
I think the local people do. I know our town clerk, if you like, when you have to have 50.
Oh yeah, no,
and
that's
they
it,
they make
yeah.
sure those
but
are
on,
for
on
real.
statewide, and especially on presidential,
1,000 or something.
they go, oh well, you know, they needed 1,000, they got
Yeah.
1,200, so we're not bothering to check the
Right.
signatures, you know, and so you know what the heck, you know. But my biggest thing is that we spend $250,000 to run the primary every 2 years in this state.
Wow.
And it's meaningless. It's like some little beauty pageant that they're running. That's not sexist to be saying that. I know, it's just when you
Beauty
get
pageants
old.
can be men and women. Could be.
Okay.
Right,
Oh, that's right. You can have a male beauty pageant, of course.
Exactly. I don't know if they call it that. But
And it becomes Beefcake Alley, I guess.
Stop while you're ahead.
But anyway, so the problem is that anybody can get on for anything. I proved this because when I was running
Yeah.
against Sorrell and Shumlin,
Right.
and then next time out against TJ and against who was it? Susie Minter, Matt
Oh,
Dunn,
yeah, Matt Dunn's right.
and Pete Galbraith and me.
Oh my gosh.
And we were all on there. And I think also my dear friend from the other side there, Chris Erickson, was also on.
She is everywhere. She's got more. Her name's on that ballot more than yours.
I know it
Are
is.
you guys competing because you lost that one? I saw her name.
I
went,
encouraged
"Huh?"
her to do that. I shouldn't tell you that, but she, you know, and Chris, like myself, we're not doing it for the heck of it. I mean, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But we're doing it because we have specific ideas and issues that we're trying to bring up. And as an individual citizen, normally you do not get the voice
Right.
to be able to say these things.
Now,
And-
you also applied for auditor and treasurer, but I think because I certainly think in the treasurer, the Republicans had a candidate, so you backed out a little bit?
What happened? Two things happened, and I guess at this late date I can confess.
Who do we know to tell?
Right. Nobody's listening.
Nobody's listening.
Anyway, so what happened is 2 days or 3 days before the closing date, there
Right.
were 4 spots that the Republicans did not have an
Right.
office for. Attorney General, Secretary of State, which I was going to run no matter what, Auditor of Accounts, and Treasurer. Now, on the very last day, Carolyn Brannigan
Right. Jumped in.
decided to jump in. Mercifully, she didn't have to go out and find 500 signatures.
Well, exactly.
You know, thank you. Oh, and I should tell you, Chris Erickson is the one that engineered all of that by going and complaining to Jim Condos and Senning, and I think she also was sending emails to T.J. Donovan.
To not have
and,
us door knock and get things.
Oh, she said, what am I going to do? Nobody wants to touch my pen. Nobody wants to take my
Right,
thing.
right.
And she had a legitimate point. And so, you know, after everybody getting done for a week or two by Chris Erickson, who is very, very tenacious, they said, oh, what the heck? You don't need any
Forget it.
signatures. You don't
Well,
need
I
anything.
think people would be, in the beginning, maybe they're more comfortable now, I am,
Yeah.
but I think people would have been a little upset with that.
Well, some of us, by the time they changed it, already had all their signatures.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I started
Sorry
in
about that.
January for
Oh,
crying
well,
out
we
loud,
didn't
yeah.
even know about this then.
But anyway, so Carolyn decided at the last minute.
Right.
So I called her. I said, do you want a little competition? I said, I'll be very gentle.
Right.
I said, and maybe you'll get a little extra press. And we discussed it for a half an hour. She said, well, I'm already known. I've been, you know, in the
Yeah.
legislature
Right.
for a number of. She says, why don't you just let me have a clear shot to the general? So I immediately
Good. Oh, that's
withdrew.
good, good.
Likewise, Linda Joy Sullivan was being promoted by the Rutland folks
Right.
to run against the evil and notorious Doug Hoffer. And
Your comments. Because I had Linda on the show, she had a very impressive background.
oh, she is
Whoa.
like, whoa. You know, and so she and I talked for a while, and I said, well, here's the problem, because the Republicans could not put her on the ballot because another one of those election laws says you can't be on more than one party's primary ballot.
Oh.
So she
so
couldn't
you're a
be,
Democrat.
right, she runs as a Democrat down her direction. And so she ran as a Democrat for an auditor of accounts
Right.
also against Hoffer. But Hoffer has all those progressives that fled over. And so
So
she was going to
lost.
have a write-in.
Yeah.
There was allegedly it was going to be a strong write-in campaign for her for auditor of accounts on the Republican ticket.
I could see
But-
her being in, when we were interviewing, I'm like, sounds familiar.
I know
what she
more.
was
I
talking
know
about.
more than I can
Yeah,
confess
well,
here
I
today.
just like,
But anyway, so what happened though? People weren't quite as enthusiastic as I was about
Yeah.
all of this. So she wound up losing to Hoffer
Right.
by like 100 votes.
Yeah, it was close.
Because Vince Aluzzi, one of Hoffer's big friends, was up stirring up trouble in the in the
Kingdom.
Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah.
And Hoffer asked all of his progressives to come over, take Republican ballots,
Right.
and write him in along with all the other Democratic candidates to try to make mischief. And anybody that says that didn't really happen need only look to the progressive ballot for auditor of accounts and find out that Chris Erickson got 400 votes and Doug Hoffer got 200 votes.
Uh-huh.
And so he now has to take
She
on.
came really close. I was surprised, though, because she's very articulate. I just don't know how in these days you can get around.
Oh, it's
Because she was an actual CPA and a
well, she
great
was
background.
a paralegal.
Yeah, she was great. Very good.
You know, and so we'll see. But anyway, so once again, that again goes back to the problem of having open primaries.
Yep.
And so ideally what I'd like to see is that we'd have closed primaries where the parties wouldn't even, the state wouldn't even be involved
Yeah,
in the
'cause
selection.
the parties
The parties,
decide, right?
the candidates would make their best effort. They'd go around to the county committees.
Right.
And we'd have a real state convention where nominees.
That could get the Republicans, Democrats, and progressives jazzed up and
It would
work together.
revitalize
Yes, I agree
party
with you.
politics in the state.
Yeah.
And they should have done this time, but Jim Condos couldn't possibly yield to my insistent calls
Well,
for
but
this.
I mean, that works. I mean, if the Democrats are pretty solid, they seem to be, although I hear there's a lot of back and forth, but that would help them, and I think, and the progressives, which we are the only state, let me get this right, because Robin Chestnut Tangeman told me, we're the only state legislature that has the Progressive Party recognized and members of the party in the legislature, which I thought was pretty cool. They certainly worked hard
Of
for
course,
that.
last time out, they had nobody on their ballot.
Oh,
You know,
really?
well, in 2018,
Just
the progressive ballot, if you get a hold of them, except for in the towns where there was a representative running as a
Right.
progressive, they had no one on the statewide ballot at all.
Don't they have to keep up their party status?
Well,
every year?
I haven't looked into this as closely as maybe somebody
Oh.
should yet.
Ah.
But when I become Secretary of State, we'll get into this. But the thing was, like in our town of Washington, in the primary you get Democratic, Republican, and progressive ballot. In my town, the progressive ballot was a blank sheet of paper with just the,
Oh, wow.
all of the positions, but no names
I
on it.
didn't notice that on mine, so I don't know what it was in
Well,
Berlin.
Polina is
Oh,
probably.
Pauline, of course, he was on.
Yeah, so Anthony's on
Yeah.
in yours, but he was
Right.
probably the only person on that ballot.
Maybe you're right. I think I was like, whoa, what is this?
Anyway, so
All right, sorry. Yeah, so besides all
we'll be
that,
running for 3 hours here tonight, folks.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the time. I just want to make sure we get to some of the basic stuff here. So can you talk, you said you had some issues with both Jim Condos, the Secretary Condos, and the state's attorney, Attorney General.
Yeah.
Could you take Secretary and say, what would you change there? What
Well,
do
I
you
think,
see?
Jim's been there for a while, and maybe we need a little fresh air in there because, he's done a lot of things against me personally, believe it or not, had laws changed because I run for more than one office.
Right.
Now, there's statewide office, so I have to get 500 signatures.
Right.
Well, a careful reading of the law said I only had to get 500 signatures to get on all the statewide offices if I wanted to.
Really?
I could do it on one ballot.
Oh,
So
just
Jim got real
just
upset.
list them.
Well, yeah, you just had 5 different offices or
Right.
4 or whatever on one petition. And so I showed up with that, and they freaked out. And they're going, "You can't do that." I said, "Read the law." I said, "Read the law." So he said,
Well, as long
"Well,
as people know what they're signing and that
yeah,
you're
well,
not.
that was my point.
Yeah.
I said, "What do you want me to go? Come up to Pat here and go,
And
here, you
5.
got to sign 5 of these." I mean,
Right.
how insane is that?
Right.
So they said, "Well, you better not try this again." I said, "Okay." So the next time, I did the exact same thing because they changed the law so it said you had to turn in a separate petition for every office you were running in. So I once again had a petition with all 4 titles
You
on
made
it.
copies?
And I made copies because the law says that petitions needn't be
They must have
original;
ready
they
to
can be
kill you.
copies or. And then I get this nasty 2-page letter from Condos going, "You will not do this again. I will take every legislative and judicial step to prevent you from doing this." Of course, then we get up to 2020, you don't need any signature or anything; you just
Right.
show
Yeah.
up.
Right.
So,
That's funny.
Anyway,
Sorry.
but so that's-
I'm surprised you didn't run for more.
Wow, no,
What's 2 for you is like a drop in the bucket.
Well, because we had other people running for the
Right,
other
yeah,
positions,
right.
and in the case of Auditor of Accounts, it was a write-in campaign, and I had been promised by the people in Rutland and Linda Joy, I said, "You're going to need 2,000 signatures to overcome," because the Democrats do this every cycle, about 1,000 of them statewide, 800 of them. They have little signing parties where they get the Republican
People
ballots,
to-
write
right,
all the
right.
Democratic candidates
Right.
in, then turn them in on primary day.
Right.
And so I said, "You're going to need 800 to 1,000 signatures." And I didn't even know Vince Saluzzi was going to be doing his
Yep.
mischief. And so she lost by 100,
Wow.
And so, Hoffer really, through intrigue, doesn't have to debate anybody. He doesn't have to do anything. His only opposition is Chris Erickson.
Yeah, right.
who-
I saw that. I said, well, I think he's going to have an easy
Well,
run there.
he won't even debate her.
Yeah.
So it's like, king for a day here,
Yeah. Well, and Jim too, right? There's
Well, there's a woman from up to St. Albans that's also running.
Right, Barry?
No. That Marion Barry's running against Peter Welsh.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
And
That's
I
right.
feel bad I can't remember the woman's name because
I'll have to look.
she's
Shame
my
on me.
legitimate candidate.
Yeah.
We're going to clip this and she's going to insert the name here.
I will. We'll put it somewhere on the introduction.
Anyway, but and so beyond the election mania that we have, and so beyond Jim fussing with me personally, over the intrigue of how the laws are written.
Right.
My biggest thing is that we should not be having open primaries, and it behooves the Democrats to do all this mischief because the Republicans don't do it, and the progressives do it some too. And progressives, matter of fact, the progressives are the worst case of all because they've basically seized control of the old Democratic Party. The real Democrats aren't running the Democratic Party anymore.
Right. People have moved a little to the left. Yeah, just a little.
So, but beyond that, there's other things in that.
So, what do you think about the way we're voting this year? Voting, I just got mine last week, and I haven't quite filled it out yet because I'm struggling.
My neighbor got
one?
his more than two.
Really?
Well, he and his wife got two, and their adult grown children who haven't been at home for 10 years got two more. And I have other friends that I have out and about saying, yeah, I got 5, I got 6.
Wow.
And and my biggest concern isn't that, okay, because hopefully those are good, honest souls. The problem comes where the nursing home gets 100.
Oh, right.
And a industrious individual working at the nursing home who is offered by one of the vote harvesting organizations, they go, hey, you know what? Every one of those you can bring back to us $5 or $10,
Right.
So 100 times 10, hey, that's like real money. And, and that's the problem. Elsewhere, like in Paterson, New Jersey, the post office gets a whole pile of these for a big apartment building, and they just drop them in the door. Somebody comes along and goes, ooh, $5 a piece for this, and this is, and in other places, they have ways of authenticating the absentee ballots.
Yep.
Okay. Here, all you have to do is print your name, print your town, sign your name, and you mail it in. But we have no signature comparisons. We have no signature samples.
Right.
So we have no way of knowing anything. Additionally, that we don't keep any information we might have asked them for, your phone number, date of birth, place of birth, mother's maiden name, something, anything.
Right.
And so we have absolutely no way. Now, ideally, if we had voter ID, none of this would be a problem.
I
but
agree.
Jim Condos has, ever since he got into that office, has vehemently opposed voter ID on the unsubstantiated claim that voter ID is voter suppression and would somehow inappropriately harm minority voters.
You have an ID to get into Costco.
You have to have an ID to go buy a bottle of Johnny Walker for crying out loud, or a pack of Lucky Strikes. And it's just crazy. And it's an insult. It's a racist statement to say that requiring voter ID is going to somehow prohibit minorities from voting. No. It's just a rude insult to the minorities. How do you think they got their driver's license or whatever else? I mean, it's just, Jim Condos is a racist.
Oh, don't go there. I'm gonna.
Well, it is a racist statement. Don't take it out.
But people aren't pushing back. They agree with
I
him.
certainly am. And I mean, he just goes, oh, it's voter suppression. Well, I'll tell you what's voter suppression is to have a primary where a lot of new people are going to be voting and are going to get the instructions screwed up.
Right.
And you're going to not know that you're supposed to put all those unvoted ballots in the envelope.
And that happens a lot.
It happened 6,000 times in the primary just passed. 6,000 people were denied their voting privilege in the primary because their ballots were rejected as defective.
Here in Vermont?
Here in Vermont.
Wow.
6,000 people. Now, probably only half of those were because of the mix-up with the ballots.
Right.
And sometimes people don't bother to put their voted ballot in the security envelope, and other things happen. But I'll guarantee you that a good 1,000 I'm sorry, 2,000 or more of that 6,000. And don't forget, Jim's been given unlimited leeway in this election. He could have on his own said, for this election only, because we know there's always problems with this, I'm waiving the requirement that the unvoted ballots be returned with the primary
They could be counted
ballot.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, because he knew that most of those people are not Democrats.
Yeah, because I think at one point Phil Scott, the governor, just sort of is that the right word? Abdicate, but is that not
That's
correct?
not true.
Okay.
What happened with Act 92,
Yeah.
condos went and said, oh, we're going to have all these troubles. And Jim has long wanted us to be a vote by mail, mass mailing state. You know, this is one of his progressive, liberal, touchstones. And so he saw the COVID as being a convenient moment. Here was his moment. And so he went to the legislature and said, whatever. And so they passed all these things, including you don't have to have signatures to get on the ballot and a lot of other things. And, we want to use PPE and some of that certainly is appropriate. But two safeguards the legislature put into Act 92. One was that the governor, that condos, whatever he came up with, would have to inform and have consent from the governor. The governor would have to agree. And the second thing was that the ballots would be mailed out. If they decided to do a mass mailing, the ballots would be mailed out by the town clerks and city clerks, period. Condos, after a few weeks, Governor Scott said, maybe we should wait and see how the primary goes. And see if this is a big problem that we need to do this $2.5 million we're spending to send out.
Which made a sense, for sure. On the
Phil Scott.
part.
I don't always agree with Phil, but this was certainly,
that was
nothing wrong with being prudent. And not one person got sick, not one person, anything during the primary. Everybody was careful, and more people voted by absentee and early ballot voting, which I have no problems with at all.
Well, that over the years, that number has been, forget COVID, just the absentee ballot. My husband and I vote early all the time because I don't want to deal with it. I just want to get it over with.
And I have no problems with that because in that case, you proactively contact your town clerk. And we've expanded this so much by email, by telephone, stop in person, send them a note. Send some smoke signals from your backyard. They'll send you a ballot. The clerk now knows that you've asked for the ballot and is anticipating your ballot coming back. Okay, that's not what we're doing this time. This time we are mailing ballots to everyone that ever thought about ever being a registered voter.
And the list itself is just got so many dead people on it, so many.
Well, we let dead people vote, Pat.
I know we do, but we don't.
We do. Sincerely, we do.
No, I know. But we don't cull the list as we should every year.
That's correct.
I mean, there's so many people that shouldn't be on that list. They've moved, all kinds of stuff.
Worse than that, Jim sent out these little postcards. I keep saying Jim. I really should be respectful. Secretary Condos. So they're going to insert the word Secretary Condos every time I say Jim.
I don't think so.
But he sent out these little postcards. Oh, this will be our trial run. The postcards, which were supposed to say return to sender, do not forward, wound up in New York, in Florida, all over the place.
Oh, you're kidding.
And so I don't.
Because they moved.
So Secretary Condos said, oh, well, in the general election, the ballot's going to have do not forward, return to sender. Guess what? Mine doesn't say it, and I'll guarantee you yours doesn't either.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I have to go look now.
But anyway, so we have all these ballots going out. We have no way of verifying what's coming back is actually the choice of the voters. And what happens if we get suddenly 90% participation, 95% participation? When will we smell the fraud rat, 102%? They have that in some of these states where they do this
more
VPM.
People than they have?
Right, there's more people voting than they have registered voters.
I love it.
And so, we're running out of time. The other things in the Secretary of State's office that they have troubles with is the Office of Professional Regulation, where a lot of people get in there, get a complaint against them, and wind up not being able to practice for a long period of time till it's resolved. My friend and surveyor who surveys my property every 5 years
right,
as part of the land use program, hasn't been able to practice for 2.5 years, and in fact is now retired
Because he couldn't get
he
the
couldn't get a
hearing or
complaint
something?
resolved.
Really?
And so, these are, he's given me sort of permission to kind of, I'm not giving you his name, but I hear this all the time.
Well, that's not right, because it's a living, that people trying
of
to make
course
a living.
it is, you know. And the thing was, when I had this thing, debate with Jim downstate, he said, oh, well, I'd like to get the other 23 professions that aren't currently under OPR brought under me. And and my thing is, about half of the ones that are in there now should be like with the Department of Health. You know, I don't think Secretary Condos knows a whole lot about the beauticians or tattoo artist or hairdresser.
When I was in House Gov Ops as a representative, the worst bill that we always had to deal with it's the OPR bill, because that thing comes in, it's yay thick, and you have to go through each one. And
and I mean, other things probably should be under the Department of Commerce and things like, you know, I mean, and you know, it's like my wife's beautician was going, oh, you know, we had all this COVID regulation and the whatever the beauticians or have a special little department. She said, we never heard from them. We eventually heard from the Secretary of State's office. I said, well, the Secretary of State runs that
oh, interesting.
Office anyway. But and so that's a big problem. Ever since they took over the state library, this is an issue relating to up to Middlesex there. The why can't I think of what it's called?
Well, I know state police are moving
no,
out of...
yeah, they're moving out of there. No, the keeping all the records and everything. I'm just having a brain freeze here.
The records retention place, whatever it is.
Right, yeah, but it has an official fancy name. But Condos took over the state library, which has now been taken down. That used to be behind the Supreme Court building. Archives, I'm sorry.
Archives, yes, that's right.
And now you used to be able to go in there, and if you had a legal case or something, you could browse the stacks. It's all locked up behind doors. If you don't know exactly what you want, and half of it's up to Middlesex, and the other half's over to the Vermont Historical Society.
Oh, great. So the library's not there anymore?
No, the library's been shut down. Apparently the Supreme Court wants some more space. So,
because they were in the pavilion, sort of, when you walked off that ramp.
Well, you went. It was behind the pavilion.
That's right.
Yep.
So they're gone now?
It's gone. Matter of fact, it broke my heart. All these volumes of old law things were being thrown in recycling bins and just thrown away.
So we don't have a state library?
We don't have a state library.
Where did it all go? I mean, what if you need something from there?
You go up to archives and hopefully you already know what you want.
Word.
And a big part of that was the law library.
Yeah.
And all of no lawyer goes there anymore because it's all, you know, Westlaw is on computers and things like that. But beyond that, also the Secretary of State's office, when Jim Douglas was there and when Deb Markowitz was there, they had an education function, which isn't really part of their job description, but they would go out and issue materials about civics and history of the state,
which
and
was
all
great.
these things. Of course it was.
Great for kids.
And since Secretary Condos has been in there, he hasn't done a bit of that. And I think that's an important part, as part of the archives function, to inform, because they're not getting it in school. We're not teaching civics, we're not teaching history, we're not teaching government anymore. And we wonder why nobody's interested in voting anymore, and nobody that does vote knows what the devil they're voting for.
I agree with you. I think civics is such an important thing to teach our kids. You know, in history, I mean, that's who you are. That's where you came from. Anyway, I want to make sure you have time to talk about the
Attorney General coming up now.
So jump right in.
Most of my problems relate back to the fact that Bill Sorrell kind of decided to turn the Attorney General's office into part of the Department of Revenue. Okay.
Bring in those lawsuits.
Yeah, bring in those lawsuits against the tobacco people and Volkswagen and whatever. And of course, the people that have been injured in all these lawsuits, the smokers, the people that use the Dish Network and Volkswagen, they wind up with pennies, and the state gets a big payday out of the thing. The smoking thing.
That kept us for years going.
But the thing was, the money was supposed to be set aside to remediate the people that got sick from smoking. and they have spent it all. There is none of it left.
I thought it was education, but
Well,
it's
that
for
was
the-
part of
for
that was the
people.
excuse part of it.
Ah.
They wanted to, you know, stop smoking and all that.
Right.
And none of that was highly effective. I hear 20%, 30% effectiveness.
Because that was a lot of money. I don't know what the number was, but big bucks.
Like $500 million,
Right,
if I'm
right.
remembering. And some of it's still trickling in. You know, of course, now they'll be teeing themselves up to go
Can I
against
ask you, our Attorney General,
Yes, that's me. Soon.
well, Mr. Attorney General, he signs his name onto a lot of lawsuits. I'm assuming,
These are the multi-state lawsuits you're
yeah,
talking
I'm
about.
assuming he has the authority to do that. I just don't understand why he can commit the state in signing those things to whatever it costs us to fight the lawsuits.
Because two things that
I mean,
office
some
does.
of them are really good,
The
some of them
Attorney
not so
General
much.
is the chief law enforcement of the state, which we'll talk about in a moment, and he is the lawyer for the state. He operates the biggest law firm
Right,
in the
right.
state, 42 attorneys, and I think
Right.
about 35 paralegals and investigators and whatever. And that's in addition to the state's attorneys, which is a whole separate
right.
county function. So he has, as the lawyer for the state, he is authorized to sign on to this kind of suit you're talking about. My problem is that when an individual like me sues the state over something important like Act 46 violated the state constitution, God forbid anybody bring that up,
Right.
or or Jim Condos is going, oh, I can't judge the whether candidates that I'm putting on the ballot are qualified,
Right.
and you go to court. I think sometimes the Supreme Court at least, would like to kind of get to answer it.
Right.
But you get so fouled in the thing we were talking about earlier about standing,
Right.
that you never, your real question never gets before the court until it's no longer,
Right.
it's unripe until it becomes moot. And so that's a big problem. And if I'm Attorney General, I will want to see that those citizen-brought actions are heard on their merits rather than on technicalities. Beyond that, the chief law enforcement thing is completely vacant. You've had all of this recently. Oh, the state police are racist, and oh, we want to defund the police. And I'll guarantee you can't find one place where T.J. Donovan has said, I'm going to say, wait a second now. I mean, I'll guarantee you we got a couple police officers who are prejudiced,
Right.
I got that.
Right.
But 95, 98, 99% of the police, 100% of the ones I know
Yep.
are good, honest people. Who the devil wants to do that job under
Right.
these
And
circumstances?
who are you going to call if they get defunded?
Pat, I live out in the town of Washington, Vermont right now. The sheriff is a half hour away. The police from either Bethel, Middlesex, or St. John's Bay are at least a half hour
Right.
away.
Right.
Our joke is when you're calling the police, just remind them to bring the body bags and the yellow tape along.
Because that's what's
It's going to be all over before
It's
they get
all
there.
over, right.
So police, I mean, if you do not have police protection,
Right.
you return to a state of nature. You become the Wild West.
right.
And
That's the nature of some people.
well, I mean, when we moved up here, our neighbors said you're going to need to go out and arm yourself, and so we went out and we have a 9mm Smith & Wesson police
Right.
special and a Browning pump-action shotgun with a little tube in it, so we can't put too many shotgun shells into it. And every spring, my wife and I go out and get a bale of hay and
Yeah.
kill that thing dead, oil up the gun, and put it away again for another year.
Myself and a whole bunch of women that I know, we're taking lessons together.
Good for you.
Yeah, bought my gun.
And I mean, that's another thing that I don't know if it's really under the purview of the Attorney General, but somebody needs to be promoting gun safety
Right.
and gun education in our schools.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid. I mean, that's another thing that they're now talking about getting rid of the safety officers
Oh, in the schools.
in the schools.
Yeah, right.
2 years ago, we were screaming for them because some kid wrote some sort of manifesto up in a
Right.
notebook, and everybody went crazy.
Right.
Because they were afraid he was going to do Lord knows what. And I mean, while I'm not so sure that somebody's going to come into the school right away and shoot the place up, it's nice for everybody to know that there's somebody there to take care of it.
And to have respect for the police.
More importantly, the children get to know, and in most cases, a retired police officer, in some cases, a retired military officer, get to know this person and find out this is like a real person, not some RoboCop robot who has no interest in me.
Right.
I've been surprised to find out. When I worked in Philadelphia, a big thing down there was PAL, the police.
Oh, yes, of course.
Police Athletic League, and really we don't have that here. But a big part of PAL was to have so the kids know that the police are really on their side.
I mean, I'm of an age where if you were in trouble anywhere, you found the nearest policeman, and that's where you went to get help.
Yeah, that dawns on me for something else.
Yeah.
There's all these cries about, oh, the cops, the police. I hate the word cops.
Right.
Leos, I'd rather use.
The law
strong.
enforcement officers.
That's right, Leos.
Yeah.
You know, that an inordinate number of minorities get stopped and have a hard time with the police.
Right.
It's because of, I believe, an inordinate number of minorities, or the majority of the people that have trouble with the police,
Right.
because they don't demonstrate any respect for the police when they're stopped.
That's right.
You know, if their parents did like my parents did and said, you know, your moment is before the judge,
Right.
not when you're in the car and the
Right.
guy with the gun standing at your car window. You
Right.
know, it's yes, sir, no, sir, I understand, sir. You know,
Thank you, sir.
thank you, sir, and be on your way. I'm sorry. Maybe maybe a confession of guilt. Which,
Well, that's, that's all right.
But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say about Attorney General is that we really, really need to resolve this issue, and this is a legislative issue and a governor issue as well. We need to get the Vermont citizens who are incarcerated back into the state. We shouldn't,
from out of
we
state.
shouldn't have hundreds of Vermonters
Right.
in Mississippi.
Right.
Now, I'm less concerned if it's cheaper to house them in Mississippi if we have some nefarious character from Massachusetts or Pennsylvania or Long Island who has come up here and done bad things, and we have convicted them and they're to be incarcerated. But people that live in the state, citizens of the state,
who have family here.
well, this is the second step. How are they supposed to be returned to the community if they've had no relationship or contact with their families for 2, 3, 5 years?
Right.
You know, in order to get them back in, into society, through probation and eventually, they have to be here, and this is just something that needs to be dealt with promptly. And you and I were talking before we went on camera about the fact with having fewer people incarcerated. Unless you are violent or danger to the community, we need to find other ways of dealing with your reparation and remediation. That they have all this high-tech ankle bracelets with GPS and everything. And some guys may see it being worse punishment to be trapped at home with their wife and the kids all the time. Maybe that's the word. But sincerely, that for a tenth of the cost, we could have them at home confinement. Have whatever community service or whatever they need to do.
Because you're right. One time I saw this guy out in front of the State House, and I hate when they make signs that you can't read from across the street. So I went over, and he was begging that his son be returned from wherever we have these kids. And God forbid I should mind my business, but I didn't. And we had the longest discussion about how hard it is for him and his wife, and I just thought, that's really sad.
And the terrible thing, and I don't think anybody says this, is when we send a lot of people away to prison who have done lesser things, we're basically sending them to the college of criminality.
And they get worse.
They go in, they learn all sorts of new and nefarious things they would have never thought of their own.
Skill training.
A new skill set, And it's just, we're laughing, but it's not funny. It's really not. And we really need to take a new perspective. And like I said, both in the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State's office, I'm hoping to bring that breath of fresh air, that I didn't work my way through the legislature. Haven't been a lawyer all of my life.
Right.
You know, I've had plenty of experience with the law. And matter of fact,
I actually thought you were an attorney. You surprised
know.
me.
Isn't that
Everybody
fun?
thinks you are.
well, see, Vermont has another unique thing.
You can write- you
needn't
can
be
write,
an
yeah.
attorney to be attorney
You
general.
But you can also take the test without going to
Well,
school.
you can. Matter of fact,
Yeah.
the female justice that just retired last year, she had
Marilyn Skoglund.
Yeah, Marilyn had worked her way up
Yeah,
through
right.
the ranks and had sat with they call that sitting for the law.
Yep, right.
Where
right.
you haven't gone.
I loved her.
She was a good
She
gal.
was excellent. Yeah, what are they doing? I'm afraid to ask about bail. Are they?
Well, that's another big thing. You know, we talk all about this bail thing, like it's some sort of the boogeyman. Oh, you know,
no bail,
the
no
poor
bail.
people. No,
Yeah.
well, no bail should mean you don't get out of the hose gown.
Right,
You don't.
right.
You know,
'Cause some people
bail.
shouldn't be allowed back out after they've done a few.
Well, but to understand that if you're being issued bail in an amount, the court doesn't believe that you're going to just show up on your own.
Right.
Because if a judge did believe that, you'd get OR'd, own recognizance. So
Right.
you're just released and you're told be back here at a certain
Right.
date. Well, if the judge doesn't have
They set bail.
they set bail, and you know it's whatever amount. You know, it's normally 10% of whatever the bail amount is. You have to come up with in
Right.
cash or whatever. But if you don't show up, then somebody's on the hook for the whole amount.
Right.
If you know, either your father's going to lose his house,
Right.
or if you had to get a bail bondsman, he's
They're
going to
not
come.
pleasant.
He's not going to be putting out
Right.
the 10 grand. He's going
Right.
to come and find you and bring you to the judge.
Right.
But that's what bail's all about: is to merely secure your.
Right.
You know, and they make it sound like it's something else, and it's not. It's just bail is to secure your appearance in court. Period. And bail only gets expensive when you look so notorious or nefarious
Right.
that the judge doesn't think you're going to show up on your own.
Well, that makes a lot of sense then.
And so, you know, all of this no bail. Well, if you want no bail, fine. We'll keep everybody in jail and
Right.
make sure they get a swift
I
trial
don't
and be
think
done
that's
with it.
what they meant, though.
I don't think that's what they
I
meant.
think
but-
they meant turn around and go home.
Well, it is. Well, look at this thing they have in all these towns where they're having the riots right now. They're letting them loose. It's like catch and release at
Right,
the trout
right.
pond at the state fair. You know,
Right.
you catch them, you throw them in,
Yeah,
you catch them again. You know, and the police are not impressed. They're doing hard work to make sure they're not arresting people they shouldn't be.
All
and whatever.
we're doing is supporting what they're doing, saying don't worry about it.
And we're making a mockery
Yeah,
of
it's
the
a-
law.
it's awful.
We're making
It's
a
awful.
mockery of
I was
government.
I want to get you a time to give a wrap up thing, but I was at the State House when they did it was a tribute to law enforcement.
Oh, I
And
was there.
the gang on the other side, that was scary.
Oh, they came up. They were like in my face.
Oh, it was awful.
I mean, I'm sitting there with my little mask on, holding my American flag. I wasn't part of it. I was just
Right.
there in support. And they're coming up, pushing up around
Yeah.
me and stuff. And I'm going, what happened to social distancing? They said,
They don't care.
They didn't
don't
care.
even know what they were there for.
Anyway,
It was pretty scary.
So I'm down to 1 minute here.
Yeah,
So I'm
all
going
right.
to tell you
Wrap
that
it
my
up.
name is Brooke Paige. I'm
And look
running
right at
for.
your camera.
Oh, my name is Brooke Paige, and I'm running for Secretary of State and Attorney General on the general election ballot. I would appreciate your vote. If you don't want to vote for Biden or for Trump, you can also vote for me and my cousin Tom for President of the United States. Most importantly, don't give your ballot to some stranger that comes knocking at the door. Mail it yourself early, or more importantly, go to the polling place on Election Day and exercise your voting franchise. Voting in person is the one way you know that your vote will be counted for sure. I'm Brooke Paige, and I thank you for listening in with me and Pat today.
And I thank you. It's delightful. That hour went very quickly.
I know.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.